Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The air in the bank was suffocating. It was too still, too perfect, like everything inside had been carefully sculpted into an image of what the world thought was wealth. Everything was spotless, the marble floors gleamed in the artificial light, the shiny counters and glass walls seemed to reflect the spotless attitudes of the people inside. But not her. She stood there in the middle of the bank, feeling completely out of place. She was a sharp contrast to the polished, well-dressed patrons, their perfectly pressed suits and polished shoes. She wasn't poor, but she didn't fit the usual mold of a customer who would walk into this bank. Her clothes were simple, worn at the edges, and her sandals didn't match the air-conditioned luxury of the space. She didn't care about the stairs. She had a purpose. She wasn't here to fit in. She was here to be heard. And right now, they weren't listening. The bank's security guard stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He towered over her, his uniform stiff and his stance rigid. "Ma'am, you're not allowed to stand here," he said curtly, his voice loud enough for a few of the waiting customers to glance over. "I'm not blocking anyone," she replied, her voice calm but firm. There was no reason to let him push her around. She knew exactly why she was here, and she wasn't leaving without speaking to someone in charge. The tension inside her chest was rising, but she didn't let it show. He raised an eyebrow, then scanned her from head to toe, his expression one of mild disdain. She could almost hear him thinking, "What is she doing here?" "I said, step aside," he repeated, this time a little louder. He reached for her arm. But she didn't move. She took a step closer to the counter, ignoring the guard's attempt to usher her away. "I need to speak to the manager," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the space, making a few more people turn to look. Her eyes, usually soft, were hard now, filled with the weight of something important. She wasn't asking. She was demanding. The guard's face reddened. He spoke into his radio, giving a report to someone behind the scenes. His gaze flickered toward the counter where a couple of bank tellers were now openly watching her. He wasn't sure how to deal with someone who wasn't backing down. Her heart raced, but she didn't show it. She had faced worse in life. This was nothing. She could handle it. And when the manager arrived, they would all see. The minutes dragged on, the tension in the air thickening. The man behind the counter, dressed in a suit too perfect to be worn by someone who worked at a place like this, stared at her, his eyes narrowed. She knew exactly what they were thinking. Who did she think she was, standing there like she belonged? "Please," one of the tellers said, with a hint of impatience, "we're busy here. Why don't you step outside, and we'll have someone call you when it's your turn." The woman raised her hand, signaling for silence. "I'm not here to wait my turn," she said, her words measured. "I came to speak with someone who can actually make a decision." The manager. The tellers exchanged uneasy glances. None of them seemed to know how to handle the situation. It wasn't like anyone had ever challenged the system here before. People like her weren't supposed to enter their pristine space. As the minutes passed, the whispers grew louder. The voices behind her were growing bolder, filled with judgment. The quiet murmurs of the customers waiting in line became whispers of disdain. "Who does she think she is?" one woman muttered, eyeing her sandals. The guard looked back at the woman, clearly frustrated. His voice now dripped with authority. "I'm calling security if you don't leave. You're causing a disturbance." She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. But she remained calm. "I'm not causing a disturbance. I'm asking for something basic," she said, taking a slow breath. "I'm asking to be treated like a human being." The words echoed in the stillness of the room, leaving a brief, uncomfortable silence in their wake. No one knew what to say, not even the guard. The only thing that broke the moment was the sound of her purse hitting the marble floor with a soft thud. In that instant, she bent down to pick it up, slowly and deliberately, her hands trembling slightly. The act of bending down felt symbolic. No one had helped her. Not one person in the entire bank offered to assist her with her fallen purse. She gathered her belongings one by one, careful not to let the coins spill from her purse onto the floor. Then it happened. The door to the bank opened with a faint click, and a car pulled up outside. It was sleek, black, and luxurious, everything the bank patrons inside were used to seeing, except for the fact that this was not a car that belonged to someone they recognized. The man who stepped out wasn't like anyone they were used to seeing either. The tall figure moved with purpose, his dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He didn't look like he had time for pleasantries. The security guard stiffened as the man walked toward the entrance. Everyone inside was staring, but no one dared to speak. The stranger seemed to possess an air of authority that demanded silence. As he reached the door, he paused and looked over at her. For a brief second, their eyes met. She didn't flinch. His gaze, however, was intense. It was as if he knew exactly who she was and where she had been. She stood motionless, clutching her purse in her hands, waiting. And then, the unthinkable happened. The man's voice, calm and measured, rang out. "I'm sorry. What is going on here?" The guard opened his mouth, but the words didn't come out. He seemed to choke on his own voice. The manager, who had been standing just behind the counter, took a hesitant step forward. "Sir, this woman is causing a scene. We've asked her to leave, but..." But the man didn't let him finish. He turned sharply toward the guard. "Who are you to tell my wife to leave?" The word wife hit like a thunderclap. No one had expected it. No one had even thought that she might be connected to someone important, someone whose name carried weight. The whispers in the bank died out instantly. The guard froze, his hand still raised, as if unsure whether to step forward or step back. The room seemed to hold its breath. "She's my wife," the man repeated, his voice now louder. "And you," he gestured sharply toward the staff. "You didn't bother to ask her name, did you?" The receptionist was visibly sweating now. "Sir, we didn't know." The man raised his hand. "No. You didn't ask, and now you've insulted her in front of everyone here." The woman stood still, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wasn't surprised. People always made assumptions. They always looked at her and saw what they wanted to see. But this time, it was different. She didn't need anyone to fight her battle. She could do that herself. Her husband, the man who everyone had just ignored, turned to her now. His eyes softened, a slight trace of concern in them. "Did they hurt you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, the tiniest smile tugging at her lips. "No. They didn't." But her eyes flickered toward the floor where the coins had fallen, still scattered. He turned back to the bank staff, his expression hardening. "You've made a mistake. And you'll answer for it." Before anyone could react, he pulled out his phone and made a quick call. The conversation was short, sharp, and direct. In the back of the bank, someone clicked a pen nervously, looking around. The manager cleared his throat, unsure of what to do next. And then, as quickly as he had come, the man turned to his wife. "Let's go." But she didn't move. Instead, she looked at the people in the room. The ones who had laughed at her. The ones who hadn't helped. She turned to him, her voice soft but certain. "No. They need to face what they did." The tension in the room was unbearable. The manager stepped back, his face pale. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. There was something far bigger waiting to unfold. And she wasn't about to let them forget. The drive back home was a silent one. The black car hummed along the empty roads, its smooth motion interrupted only by the occasional bump in the pavement. The woman, still clutching her purse in her lap, stared out the window. She wasn't crying, she hadn't cried in years, but the weight of everything that had happened in the bank seemed to press down on her chest, making it harder to breathe. Her husband, sitting beside her, was still as stone. His jaw was clenched, his fingers tapping the armrest, but not once did he speak. His silence wasn't the comforting kind. It wasn't the calm before a storm, nor the quiet of someone who didn't know what to say. It was the silence of someone who had been pushed too far. He hadn't said a word after the scene at the bank. She hadn't expected him to. She didn't need his protection. Not today, not ever. But the fact that he'd been there, that he'd taken control so swiftly, wasn't lost on her. But she had her own thoughts now. She had her own plans. The anger that had been simmering just below the surface was starting to rise, though. It wasn't just about what had happened in the bank. It wasn't just the insult or the humiliation. No, it was something deeper. Something that had been quietly festering inside her for years, waiting for the right moment to surface. When they reached their home, a sprawling property tucked on the outskirts of town, the gates opened without a word from anyone. The house was quiet, the way it always was when they arrived. The staff, used to his sudden appearances, didn't dare to acknowledge his presence immediately. They'd learned long ago that when he was in one of his moods, they were better off staying out of sight. But today felt different. The tension in the air was thick. Something was about to change, she could feel it. Her husband stepped out first, his shoes clicking sharply on the cobblestone path. She didn't follow him immediately. Instead, she lingered in the car, her hand resting on the door. She had questions, more questions than she could put into words right now. But one thing was certain, there were layers to him, layers that had never been revealed to her. She knew her husband was a powerful man. She knew his influence, his wealth, his ability to make people bend to his will. But she had never fully understood the extent of it. She had never needed to. But today, something had shifted. Something that had been hidden was now out in the open, and she couldn't pretend she didn't want answers. She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking softly on the stone pathway. Her husband was already inside, his figure silhouetted against the grand windows of the mansion. She followed him through the front door, into the cold, sterile air of their home. The maids had prepared everything for his return, as they always did. They moved like shadows, their faces neutral, their eyes downcast. Her husband didn't acknowledge them as he made his way toward his study. She wasn't sure if he even saw them. He moved with purpose, as always, but today there was an added sharpness to his steps, a sense that something big was coming. She paused for a moment in the hallway, looking at the large, framed photographs that lined the walls. Pictures of their wedding. Of their life together. Of places they had been, events they had attended. She had always been a quiet presence in the background of their social life. A wife, a partner, but never the center of attention. She had learned long ago to stay out of the spotlight. To be content with the role she had been given. But that role was about to change. She walked down the hallway, her footsteps steady now, filled with purpose. She had made up her mind. She was done being invisible. She was done hiding behind the facade of the quiet, obedient wife. Today, she would demand answers. And if they weren't the answers she wanted, well, she'd figure out what to do next. She opened the door to the study without knocking. Her husband, seated at his desk, looked up in surprise, his brows furrowing. "Didn't hear you come in," he said, his voice calm but with an edge to it. He was trying to maintain control, trying to keep the tension from spilling over. But it was there, under the surface. "I need to know what's going on," she said, her voice steady but firm. She wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. She wasn't afraid of anyone. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his face. He studied her for a long moment, his eyes calculating. "What do you mean?" he asked, though she knew he understood exactly what she meant. "The bank." "Today," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "I want to know why you didn't tell me. Why you kept this from me." Her words hung in the air, thick and sharp. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands resting on the desk. "I didn't keep anything from you," he said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. "You were always safe. You've always been safe. The less you know, the better." She didn't blink. "That's not good enough anymore. I'm not a child. I don't need you to protect me from the world. I'm not some helpless woman you can hide away." He stood up, suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The movement was so sharp it startled her. She wasn't used to seeing him like this, so unsettled, so angry. "You think I want to protect you?" he snapped, his voice rising. "You think I do this to keep you safe? I do it because the world is not as simple as you want to believe. It's not as easy as walking into a bank and asking for help. There are people out there who would destroy you, destroy everything we have, if they knew the truth." Her pulse quickened. "What truth?" she asked, her voice shaking now, though she was trying to keep it steady. He turned away from her, pacing across the room. "I didn't want you involved in this. But now, it's too late." He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "You want to know the truth? You want to know why I had to keep you in the dark?" She nodded. "Yes. I need to know." He faced her again, his eyes dark. "I never wanted you to know what I've been doing. What I've been involved in. You're better off not knowing." "Why?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. "Why keep it a secret from me?" "Because, if you knew the truth, you'd leave me," he said softly, his voice now surprisingly tender. The words hung in the air, heavy and full of unspoken meaning. She stared at him, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what he was getting at, but it felt like a threat, a warning, something darker than what she had imagined. "What truth? What could possibly be so bad that you think I'd leave?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the desperation was clear. He paused, then took a step toward her. "It's not just about us. It's about everything, the people I work with, the deals I've made. If they knew about you, if they knew who you really were, they'd destroy you." Her mind raced. "Who am I, really?" she thought. The woman in the bank, the woman who had been thrown out like nothing, like a nobody, was no longer the same. There was something about this, about his secrecy, about his coldness, that was making her question everything. "I never wanted you to be involved in this world," he repeated. "I thought I could protect you by keeping you away from it. But you're already in it. Whether you like it or not, the moment you stepped into that bank today, everything changed." She shook her head, her confusion growing with each passing second. "What world? What are you talking about?" He let out a breath, his face shadowed with something darker than frustration. "I've made deals with people who don't care about who you are, who don't care about anyone. The things I've done." He stopped, looking at her, as if deciding whether or not to continue. But it was too late to turn back now. She knew, somehow, that the answers she was getting weren't the ones she wanted. But they were the ones she needed. And she wasn't going to walk away until she had the truth. The silence between them was deafening. He stood there, watching her, his eyes hard and cold. She felt as though every second that passed without him speaking was a second she could never get back, time slipping away, wasted in a fog of uncertainty. She wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. But the weight of his silence was enough to make her heart race, enough to make the walls around her seem like they were closing in. She had never truly understood the depth of the world he operated in, the dangerous alliances, the deals that crossed the lines of legality and morality. He had always kept her away from it, telling her that the less she knew, the safer she would be. But she wasn't so sure anymore. "I'm done with the secrets," she said, her voice cutting through the thick air between them. "You keep saying you're protecting me. But from what? What is it you think I can't handle?" He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. "You don't understand. It's not just about you. It's about everything I've built. Everything that's at stake." She shook her head, her chest tightening. "Then make me understand. I need to know the truth." He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether or not to say the words that had been hanging between them for so long. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. "I didn't want you to know that I'm not who I said I was. The man you thought I was? He doesn't exist." Her stomach churned, but she didn't look away. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're my husband. I know who you are." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You don't. You don't know the real me. I'm not just some businessman or philanthropist. I'm involved in something much bigger." She took a step back, her mind racing, trying to process his words. What could be bigger than what he had already told her? What kind of life had he been living without her knowing? She had always trusted him, believed in him. But now, the foundation of everything she thought she knew was crumbling. "I've made my money in ways you wouldn't believe," he continued, his voice steady, though there was an edge to it. "There are people out there, dangerous people, who don't care who I am. And if they find out about you, if they find out what we have, they will destroy it all." Her throat tightened, the weight of his words sinking in. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out the silence of the room. "What do you mean, destroy it all? What are you involved in, really?" He turned away from her, his jaw clenched tightly. She could see the muscles in his back tense as he exhaled sharply. "I'm part of something I can't walk away from. These people, the ones I do business with, they're not like us. They don't care about family or loyalty. They only care about power. And if they think I've betrayed them, if they think I've been hiding something, they'll come after everything." Her mind was spinning. Betrayal. Hiding something. Power. The words echoed through her thoughts like a thunderclap. She had never once questioned his honesty, his integrity. But now she was starting to see the cracks, the dark corners she had never known existed. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What am I in all of this? What happens to me when they find out about me?" He finally turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. "I'm trying to protect you. I've tried to keep you out of it, but it's getting harder. The more I push people away, the more they get suspicious." She stood frozen, unable to breathe. "Who are these people? Who are you really working for?" He took a deep breath and stepped toward her, his hands clasped behind his back. "I'm not just some wealthy businessman, love. I've been working for a cartel. A dangerous one. And I've been making deals with them for years. Everything you've seen, the luxury, the lifestyle, it's all built on a foundation of lies." Her mind reeled. The words were too much. Cartels? Deals with criminals? She had known her husband had his fair share of business dealings, but this was something else entirely. "A cartel?" she whispered, the reality of it sinking in. "You're telling me I've been married to someone involved in that?" He nodded slowly. "I've done things I'm not proud of. I've made decisions that," he stopped himself, as if he couldn't bear to finish the sentence. "But I've kept you out of it. I kept you safe. I thought I could control it. But now, it's out of my hands." Her stomach twisted into knots. "You thought you could control a cartel? She asked, her voice rising in disbelief. How could you possibly think that? I thought I could. I thought I had the power, the influence to keep everything in check, he said, his voice tinged with regret. But it's bigger than me now. They want more. And I've made too many enemies. If they find out if they think you're a liability, they'll come after you. After everything we've built. She took a step back, her mind racing. Everything. The house. The money. The life they had shared. It was all built on lies. Everything she had known, everything she thought she had been a part of, was crumbling in front of her. Why didn't you tell me, she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. Why didn't you trust me with this? I was trying to protect you, he shouted suddenly, the words bursting from him like a dam breaking. I didn't want you to get caught in this world. It's not a world you can just walk away from. You think you can live a normal life, but you can't. Not when they're watching. Not when they've got their eyes on you. I didn't want you to get hurt. I didn't want you to see me for what I really am. She took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to rise. Her world was falling apart, and the man she had loved, the man she thought she knew, was a stranger in front of her. She had married a man who had deceived her, who had kept secrets that ran so deep, she wasn't sure if she would ever be able to trust anyone again. You've lied to me for so long, she whispered. I don't know who you are anymore. He seemed to deflate at her words, the anger fading, replaced by a deep sorrow. I never wanted to lie to you. But I couldn't tell you the truth. I couldn't let you see what I've been a part of. You're better off not knowing. But the damage was already done. She had seen enough, heard enough to know that her life would never be the same again. She couldn't go back to the way things were. She couldn't pretend that everything was fine. That they were just like any other couple. The silence between them stretched on, filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. She didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go from here. All she knew was that she couldn't stay. Not in this house, not with him. Not when everything was a lie. I need time, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I need to figure this out. He nodded, his face pale, as though the very mention of her needing time had shattered something inside of him. I understand, he said softly. I'll give you all the time you need. But she wasn't sure that was enough. She wasn't sure there would ever be enough time to undo the damage that had been done. She turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As she reached the threshold, she paused, her hand resting on the doorknob. You may have kept me safe from the cartel, she said, her voice cold, but you never kept me safe from you. And with that, she stepped out into the night, leaving him behind. The city had a different kind of silence in the early hours of the morning. It was as though the streets held their breath, waiting for the world to wake up, to carry on with its hustle. The sound of her footsteps was the only noise that filled the air as she walked along the quiet sidewalk. Her mind was racing, too fast to keep up with her own thoughts, but there was one thing she was sure of, she couldn't stay in that house any longer. Not with him. Not after everything. The night had been long, the hours slipping by like sand through her fingers. She hadn't gone home. She had nowhere to go, nowhere that felt like home anymore. Not since he had pulled back the veil and revealed the truth she never thought she'd need to know. The man she had married was a stranger, a man with secrets that ran so deep, she wasn't sure who he really was. The night had been filled with unanswered questions, the kind that gnawed at her from the inside. She had tried to make sense of everything, but no matter how many times she replayed his words in her mind, the pieces didn't fit. She had thought she knew him. She had trusted him. Now, nothing was clear anymore. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was him. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. She paused at a small cafe, its warm lights flickering against the dark streets. She stepped inside, the comforting scent of coffee filling the air. The barista behind the counter gave her a polite smile, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were focused on the cup she had ordered, the steam rising in thin tendrils from the surface. The coffee was lukewarm now, but it didn't matter. It was the only thing that gave her a semblance of normalcy in the chaos of her mind. She sat down at a corner table, the shadows of the night pressing in on her. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, the chill of the early morning air still lingering on her skin. The question that had been haunting her all night echoed in her mind, what now? She had known, for years, that something was off. She had sensed the distance between them, the lies that had always been just beneath the surface. She had accepted it because she wanted to. She had wanted to believe that their life was what it appeared to be. But now, all of that was gone. All the comfort, the luxury, the facade, it was all a lie. And yet, a part of her couldn't let go. A part of her still wanted to believe in him. To believe that there was something redeemable in the man she had loved. She closed her eyes, pressing her palms against her temples as if to push away the pain. The buzz of her phone again broke the silence. This time, she answered, her fingers shaking as she tapped the screen. Hello? His voice came through the line, rough, desperate. Where are you? She didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? The words felt empty, meaningless. He had lied to her. He had kept her in the dark for so long. But despite the hurt, despite the anger, there was a part of her that still cared. I'm not coming back, she said softly, her voice tight with emotion. There was a pause, and for a moment, she thought he might hang up. But then, his voice came through again, raw, filled with something close to fear. I can't let you walk away from this, he said, his tone pleading. You don't understand. It's not just about me. It's about everything. I can't protect you if you leave. She felt the weight of his words pressing against her chest, suffocating her. He wasn't just asking her to stay for him. He was asking her to stay for the life they had built together, a life built on lies and secrets. A life she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. I don't need your protection, she said, her voice shaking. I need the truth. All of it. And I need you to stop lying to me. Another long pause stretched between them, and she could hear his breathing, shallow and uneven. He was holding on to something, something that didn't want to slip away. I'm meeting someone today, he said, his voice a mixture of defeat and determination. I need you to meet me. There's more you need to know. It's not what you think. I swear, I never wanted you to get caught up in this. She wanted to say no. She wanted to hang up, to walk away and never look back. But she couldn't. Not yet. She still needed answers. She needed to know if there was anything left of the man she had married or if the person he had become was unrecognizable. Where? She asked, her voice steady but her hands trembling. He gave her an address, an unfamiliar place on the outskirts of the city. It was a warehouse, one of many scattered along the industrial side of town. Her heart sank. The last place she wanted to go was to a warehouse where she knew danger lurked, where the past she had tried so hard to ignore was still waiting for her. But there was no choice. She couldn't run from it anymore. I'll be there, she said, before ending the call. She took one last sip of her coffee, the bitter taste lingering in her mouth as she stood up, tossing the cup into the trash. Her thoughts were a whirl of confusion, anger, and a strange, aching hope. What was it he needed to tell her? What was so important that he was willing to risk everything to get her to listen? The drive to the warehouse felt like it took forever. She could feel the weight of each mile, the knowledge that she was walking deeper into a world she had never fully understood. A world of danger, of lies, and of things she might not be able to undo. When she arrived, the place was eerily quiet. The large, metal doors of the warehouse loomed in front of her like a dark mouth waiting to swallow her whole. She parked her car a few yards away, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she sat there, taking in the scene. No one was around. There was no sign of life. But she knew he was here. She could feel it in her bones. She stepped out of the car, her heart thudding in her chest. The silence of the night seemed to press in on her, urging her to turn back. But she couldn't. Not now. As she approached the entrance, the heavy door creaked open, a figure stepping out from the shadows. It was him. Her husband stood there, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed with something darker than regret. He didn't speak at first. He only watched her, his gaze intense, as if he were measuring her reaction, trying to read her thoughts. "I'm here," she said, her voice a whisper in the night. "Now tell me everything." He nodded slowly, then motioned for her to follow him inside. The lights flickered on, revealing a scene that sent a chill down her spine. There were men in the warehouse, his men. Standing around in a loose formation. They were silent, their eyes scanning her as she walked past them, each step heavier than the last. Her husband led her to the center of the room, where a table was set up, covered in papers and files. She glanced at the papers, her stomach turning as she recognized the names, people she had heard about but never thought she'd be connected to. "This is it," he said, his voice low, filled with finality. "This is what I've been trying to protect you from." He took a deep breath and then began to speak, his words tumbling out in a rush, as if he couldn't stop them from coming. "Everything you've seen, the money, the luxury, the people I've worked with, it's all tied to this. To the cartel. To the deals I've made. But it's not just about money. It's about control. Power. And I've made too many enemies. They know who you are now. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Her mind was spinning, but she forced herself to focus. "What do they want?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "They want you. They want you to turn on me. They think you know too much. And if I don't give them what they want, they'll come after you." The room seemed to close in around her. The weight of his words was suffocating. She had thought she understood the depth of his involvement. But this was more than she could have ever imagined. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her, his face grim. "Now, we make a choice.